Growing up in a very privileged town, I often noticed that all my peers and my friends' parents were together except for mine. And I always thought, why me? And why were my parents the ones who were split up before I had any recollection of who I was, what I do, what my purpose is, who I am? But honestly, it has set me up for the greater good, and here I am now. So, how does living with one parent set a child up for a better adult life? Well, I'll give you some background information. So, I have lived with my mom for all 18 years of my life. She is very supportive of me and always supports my decisions and is very, very proud of where I am and who I am now. But I also do have a father in the picture, but he does not live with me. He lives about an hour, a little over an hour away, but he still supports me from afar and is very, very proud of who I've become as well. I have been the youngest to graduate high school and the one to do it in the least amount of time, and I am on track to be the youngest college graduate out of my whole family. So, today I will be presenting to you guys how children growing up in single-parent households are just as balanced, more mature than than other children are. How communication and maturity often usually occurs way earlier in life, how the success of a child in their education and their studies honestly is mind-blowing, and also how independence is taught at a young age. So here we have communication and maturity. So it was kind of hard to find information and stuff about this, but I did find some pretty helpful quotes. So here's my first one. Many children living with single mothers have other important adults in their family. So I often relied on my grandpa whenever he was still around, and I still to this day rely on my aunt and uncle whenever my mom goes out of town. So if anything goes wrong, usually I will report to them or I'll talk to them and I'll let them know the spiel. And then we have, the reason why I believe that children who grow up in single-parent households have a more mature way of speaking and have better communication skills is because they're required to talk to adults more. Because sometimes their parent isn't able to make it or isn't around to, do the things that they need to do. They have the child do it for them. So they learn really, really early in life how to communicate really, really well with adults. And so I've noticed that, and I've been had that pointed out for me before. So we also have that communication is also important in the outside world. So getting my first job, a lot of people would ask, are you really 16? Are you really 15? Because I was 15 at the time. And they were always very, very just unsure about that. And they were like, there's no way you're 15. And I was like, well, here's my ID. Yes, I am. So next, we're going to assess how education and the success in single-parent household is prevalent. So it's really, really hard to come across many, many studies. It's usually about children who are in poverty, but I found this one about a father's absence may not affect a child's cognitive outcomes or academic performance. So I feel like being in a single-parent household shouldn't crush a child's ability to dream and want to be something better than what they've come from. So you really think money shouldn't factor in to how a child is educated, because now we have the No Child Left Behind Act, where that is where children of all schools are mandated or required to take mandated tests that cover math and reading, which is on the SAT and ACT, which typically is set in stone to better prepare them as they grow up and take their standardized tests that they need to get into college. And lastly, we have one of the things that I find very, very interesting and that really, really shows the difference of children who live in single-parent households and married parent households is independence taught young. So the quote that I found for this one was that children living in single-parent households can often be more mature than those who are not because of the extra roles they have. Usually they take care of their siblings and themselves. So I was one of those children where I wanted to be independent from day one. The milk carton was as big as me, yet I still wanted to pour it in with my little stick arms. But children in single-parent households are more likely to learn about the outside world before those who live in two-parent households, I was learning how to cut the grass at 12. I learned how to grocery shop around the same age, and I learned how to manage my money as soon as I got my first job. So I know how to, and I know a little bit on how to pay taxes, thanks to my mom teaching me, but also looking it up myself. So then we have usually children in one-parent households need to get jobs in order to help themselves or help their family to keep a roof over their head or keep food in their stomachs. Then lastly, we have opinions. So how do opinions, how do they really, teach, how do they teach independence? Well, I've noticed that children who live with two parents often rely on their parents' opinions and not their own. So let's say if they're buying a car, they want the one that has the fastest, the fastest acceleration that there is. But I'd be the one, what's the gas mileage? What's the maintenance upkeep? How expensive is it to own this car? But, children who have two parents usually don't have to rely on that. So again, my presentation to you today was discussing how children in single-parent households can be just as mature, well off, good looking, I'm just kidding, but how communication and maturity is very, very clear from a young age, as well as education and their success rate in the classroom, and also independence is taught younger to these children. So again, thank you guys for listening, and I hope to see you guys for my next speech.